The diencephalon consists of the third ventricle and the structures that form its boundaries, such as the thalamus, subthalamus, epithalamus, and hypothalamus. It extends posteriorly to the point where the third ventricle becomes continuous with the cerebral aqueduct, and anteriorly as far as the interventricular foramina. Thus, the diencephalon includes the midline structures located beyond the walls of the third ventricle. Let's review this region first. The third ventricle has anterior, posterior, lateral, superior, and inferior walls. The anterior wall is formed by a thin sheath of gray matter, the lamina terminalis, across which runs the anterior commissure. The anterior commissure is a round bundle of nerve fibers that are situated anterior to the anterior columns of the fornix. They connect the right and left temporal lobes. The posterior wall is formed by the opening into the cerebral aqueduct. Superior to this opening is the small posterior commissure. Superior to the commissure is the pineal recess, which projects into the stalk of the pineal body. Superior to the pineal recess is the small habenular commissure. The lateral wall is formed by the medial surface of the thalamus superiorly and the hypothalamus inferiorly. These two structures are separated by the hypothalamic sulcus. The lateral wall is limited superiorly by the stria medullaris thalami. The lateral walls are joined by the interthalamic connection. The superior wall, or roof, is formed by a layer of ependyma that covers the telechoroidea of the third ventricle. Within the telechoroidea lie the internal cerebral veins. Superiorly, the roof of the ventricle is related to the fornix and the corpus callosum. The fornix is a thick bundle of fibers that originate in the hippocampus of the temporal lobe and arches posteriorly over the thalamus to join the mammillary bodies. The inferior wall or floor is formed by the optic chiasm, the tuber cinereum, the infundibulum with its funnel-shaped recess, and the mammillary bodies. The hypophysis is attached to the infundibulum. Posterior to these structures lies the tegmentum of the cerebral peduncles. And as you see, the region is a little bit complicated, so let's review the main structures again. Anterior wall of the third ventricle, lamina terminalis, anterior commissure, anterior columns of the fornix, posterior wall, opening into the cerebral aqueduct, posterior commissure, pineal recess, pineal gland, habenular commissure, stria medullaris thalami, hypothalamic sulcus, interthalamic connections, medial surface of the thalamus, corpus callosum, fornix, hippocampus, mammillary body, optic chiasm, tuber cinereum, infundibulum, hypophyseal recess, hypophysis. The thalamus is a large, ovoid mass of gray matter situated on each side of the third ventricle. The anterior end of the thalamus is narrow and rounded and forms the posterior boundary of the interventricular foramen. The posterior end is expanded to form the pulvinar, which overhangs the superior colliculus and the superior brachium. The lateral geniculate body forms a small elevation on the under aspect of the lateral portion of the pulvinar. In its turn, the inferior colliculus is connected with the medial geniculate body via the inferior brachium. The lateral surface of the thalamus is separated from the lentiform nucleus by the internal capsule. The subthalamus lies inferior to the thalamus and includes the subthalamic nucleus, the cranial ends of the red nuclei, and the substantia nigra. The subthalamic nucleus has the shape of the biconvex lens. The nucleus has important connections with the corpus striatum. As a result, it is involved in the control of muscle activity. Actually, it is situated between the thalamus and the tegmentum of the midbrain. Crania medially, it is related to the hypothalamus. The epithalamus consists of the habenular nuclei with their connections and the pineal gland. The habenular nucleus is a small group of neurons situated just medial to the posterior surface of the thalamus. It receives afferent fibers from the amygdaloid nucleus in the temporal lobe through the stria medullaris thalami. Other fibers pass from the hippocampal formation through the fornix and send axons to the interpeduncular nucleus in the roof of the interpeduncular fossa, the tectum of the midbrain, the thalamus, and the reticular formation of the midbrain. Some of the fibers of the stria medullaris thalami cross the midline via the habenular commissure and reach the habenular nucleus of the opposite side. The pineal gland is attached by the pineal stalk to the diencephalon and projects backward posterior to the midbrain. The base of the pineal stalk possesses a recess that is continuous with the cavity of the third ventricle. The superior part of the base of the stalk contains the habenular commissure. The inferior part of the base of the stalk contains the posterior commissure. The pineal gland possesses no nerve cells, just pinealocytes and the glial cells. Now let's look to the hypothalamus. This part of the diencephalon lies below the hypothalamic sulcus on the lateral wall of the third ventricle and extends from the region of the optic chiasma to the caudal border of the mammillary bodies. Anterior to the hypothalamus is an area that extends forward till the lamina terminalis and the anterior commissure. It is referred to as the preoptic area. Caudally, the hypothalamus merges into the tegmentum of the midbrain. When observed from below, the hypothalamus is seen to be related to the following structures from anterior to posterior. They are the optic chiasma, the tuber cinereum and the infundibulum, and the mammillary bodies. The optic chiasma is situated at the junction of the anterior wall and floor of the third ventricle. Anteriorly, chiasma is continuous with the optic nerves and posteriorly with the optic tracts. The optic recess of the third ventricle lies on its superior surface, here. The tuber cinereum is a convex mass of gray matter that continues inferiorly with the infundibulum at an elevation called the median eminence. The infundibulum is hollow and becomes continuous with the posterior lobe of the hypophysis cerebri. Just behind the tuber cinereum are two small hemispherical bodies, mammillary bodies. Posterior to the mammillary bodies lies an area of the brain that is pierced by a number of small apertures and is called the posterior perforated substance. These apertures transmit the central branches of the posterior cerebral arteries. Thalamus, anterior end, pulvinar, medial geniculate body, lateral geniculate body. Hypothalamus, optic chiasm, tuber cinereum, infundibulum, hypophysis, mammillary body.